Perhaps the key feature of the Passat B was the enormous choice of power units and many transmission variations. Another major difference from the previous model was the engine location. In the fifth generation of Passats, it was installed longitudinally, but in the new model it is installed transversely, so it already has 6 cylinders. The standard engine for the B6 is a weak 8-valve power unit, 1.6 in volume and marked BSE. It works exclusively with a 5-speed manual transmission and is highly reliable, unpretentious, but sometimes it likes to eat oil and has problems with cooling. There is also a Passat with an MPI engine, the power of which is 102 horses, and this, in general, is the best option if you need a car for everyday driving within the city. But the further it goes, the worse it gets. Among all the engines with which these cars were equipped, there are 2 naturally aspirated engines, which introduced motorists to the FSI system, layer-by-layer injection, which allows the engine to operate on a lean fuel assembly. The 1.6 FSI engine marked BLF received 115 horses. And at first impression, many car enthusiasts praised it for its timing chain drive. They say that it does not need to be changed, since the standard version of the engine has a timing belt. But it was not there. In practice, the chain stretched incredibly quickly, began to rattle and even jump after 80 to 100,000. True, you change the oil every 10,000, or better yet more often, then it could last up to 200,000. In addition, the lambda probes, which broke very quickly, the rustling of the phase shifter and a whole scattering of problems associated with injection also caused disappointment. For example, the fuel pump pusher could easily cut shavings into oil. This internal combustion engine is paired with a 6-speed manual transmission or an Aisin automatic transmission, the only 2.0 naturally aspirated engine with 150 horsepower and direct injection was labeled BLR. It was paired with a 6-speed manual and automatic transmission. This power unit pulls excellently, but requires care and timely maintenance. The timing drive is a belt, but the intake camshaft operates with a short chain. Among the obvious weaknesses, capricious phase shifter, problematic USR servo drive, the crankcase ventilation system tubes are flimsy, the oil intake gets clogged often and quickly, classic injection problems. In 2005, the Passat B6 received a new engine, 200 horsepower. TFSI family EA113. We can safely say that this engine is still the same 2.0 FSI, except with a turbine and absolutely identical problems. Already in 2007, the model received new turbocharged engines. Perhaps the most notorious of them is the 1.4 TSI model with 122 horses, Saha, EA111 family. The engine became famous for the fact that, due to an unsuccessful tensioner, the chain jumped. Moreover, it stretched extremely quickly. Among other problems, the turbine bypass valve often jams, antifreeze flows abundantly through the intercooler, decent oil consumption. In the same year, the Passat B6 began to be equipped with the very well-known power units of the EA888 family. It includes 2 engines designed from scratch, 1.8 TSI and 2.0 TSI. If we talk about the best of the worst, then this is the first option, 1.8, marked BZB. This particular motor, unlike the rest of the EA888 line, does not consume oil so actively, but it has a classic problem, a terrible timing chain that stretches, although not so quickly, but that's where its advantages end. A terrible pump was installed on the motor, which is made in a plastic case and is driven by a separate belt. The pump is connected to a plastic splitter. It contains a thermostat with a temperature sensor. This entire complex structure leaks regularly, and if the pump jams or the belt breaks, the motor in question will simply burn out. All other power units of this family simply love oil. Approximately 1,000 kilometers requires at least 0.5 if not the cheapest oil. Experienced car enthusiasts familiar with this problem spent money on installing new pistons and rings, who did not have such an appetite. In addition, TSI power units had the following problems, constant problems with the timing chain, the valves were simply overgrown with carbon deposits, the crankcase ventilation system was not doing its job. This engine was paired with a 6-speed manual or automatic transmission, but there were also versions with a 7-speed pre-selective transmission. But the 2.0 TSI engine was equipped only with a 6-speed manual or automatic transmission. Rounding out the petrol engines on the Passat B6 are 2 VR6 engines of 3.2 and 3.6 liters. The power unit has direct injection, and the cylinder block is cast from cast iron. If we talk only about gasoline internal combustion engines installed on the Passat, then these are definitely the most successful. Yes, the chains are still not the ultimate dream, but they can withstand 200,000 without any problems. The most common problems include carbon deposits on valves, not the best crankcase ventilation valve membrane, which often simply bursts, ignition coils that quickly fail. VR6 engines have 250 to 300 horses and are installed together with a wet DSG DQ 250 and all-wheel drive. In our region it is extremely rare, but you can still find a front-wheel drive American version with an Aisin automatic transmission. With diesel power units everything is much simpler. The Passat B6 started with 1.9 and 2.0 liter pump injector diesel engines. The second option had 8 and 16 valve cylinder heads. ICEs belong to the EA188 family. The standard 1.9-liter engine has only 105 horsepower and is equipped only with a 5-speed manual transmission. The 2.0 TDI already had a choice, a 6-speed manual or a wet DSG DQ 250. The 8-valve 2.0 TDI has 140 horses. There are 6 varieties with 16 valves: BVE, BWV, BKP, PMA, Buzz, PMR. All of them were equipped with piezoelectric pump injectors, from 120 to 170 horsepower. These engines have a colossal army of fans, but in fairness, it's difficult to call the engines high quality and problem-free. Immediately after the start of sales of the Passat B6 with diesel engines, they caused a lot of problems. For example, the engine could simply die due to the failure of the oil pump. The injectors were capricious and did not want to work with bad fuel. Moreover, it was impossible to repair them. No one knew how to do it, so we had to buy new ones. The injector sockets of the 8-valve power unit quickly wore out, and the cylinder heads of the 16-valve ones simply cracked. Because of this, the liquids could mix, fuel went into the oil or pan, antifreeze got into the oil pump, etc. In general, at the launch of the Passat B6, these engines hit Volkswagen's reputation hard. But today, almost all of these problems have been eliminated, so that the engines have become more reliable. Only in 2009 were these power units finally replaced by diesel engines from the EA189 family with common rail. As standard, the car had a 1.6 internal combustion engine, CAYC, with 105 horses. In addition, there are 2.0 engines, CBDC 110, but 136, POB 140, PAC 143, CBBB 170, with power from 110 to 170 horsepower. The 2.0 engines already had classic problems with the oil pump from the start. But already in October of the same year, Volkswagen engineers quickly solved this problem. In general, car enthusiasts like the updated diesel engines with common rail, so it is not surprising that over time, Passat fans began to switch to updated diesel engines, getting rid of problematic gasoline power units. You can easily find a Passat B6 with any type of transmission. A 5-speed manual transmission works with standard power units, 1.6 MPI and 1.9 TDI. The situation with the 6-speed manual is much worse. It received 2 problematic models. It comes complete with 2.0 FSI, TDI and TSI engines. The manual transmission of models O2Q and O2S rarely withstood even 150,000, after which it literally fell apart. The problem was a vulnerable rear mainshaft support bearing. After just a few thousand kilometers, problems appeared with the transition to first gear and reverse gear. In addition, when driving, the gearbox lever simply got stuck in the reverse position. There were also noticeable problems with the clutch. It got to the point where excessive play in the input shaft appeared and the gearbox simply jammed while driving, which led to the destruction of the manual transmission housing. In principle, it would be incorrect to say that there were any vulnerabilities in the design of the 6-speed gearbox. Problems only appeared when operating a car with a rattling and worn dual-mass flywheel. As a result of flywheel play in the gearbox, synchronizers and gear clutches begin to deteriorate. In particularly advanced cases, the teeth of the differential-driven gear begin to fail, the rivets break off and the bearings wear out. All this is accompanied by a loud crunch. If you're lucky, the flywheel can last no more than 150,000, but with automatic transmissions, the Passat B6 is not doing well. Much depends on the market where the car was delivered, CIS countries or Europe, where one version of the power unit can be paired with different automatic transmissions. In particular, with DSG or hydromechanics, the selector of cars with DSG was designated by these 3 letters, automatic 09G from Aisin. The Aisin TF60SN hydromechanical automatic transmission was first paired with 2 naturally aspirated engines with direct injection, 1.6 and 2.0 FSI, as well as a turbocharged 2.0 TFSI, after which another 1.8 TSI turbo engine was released. This automatic can also be found paired with a 3.6 VR6 power unit. This automatic transmission is extremely demanding on the quality of the oil and its cooling. Moreover, the following pattern can be traced: the smaller the volume of the engine, the smaller the radiator of the box. And this is fraught with disastrous consequences. Thus, constantly standing in a traffic jam in the heat with a clogged radiator can cause deformation of the valve body. If there are noticeable shocks and strong impacts while driving, then the problem is that the oil in the transmission is overheating. Most often, this problem appears in Passats equipped with a 1.8 TSI. They have obvious problems with cooling the transmission fluid. Most car enthusiasts had problems with the 09 G6-speed automatic transmission on the Passat B6 after the warranty expired. But with careful driving and regular oil changes, after 50 to 60,000, the automatic transmission could last more than 200,000. Also, another culprit in the death of the automatic transmission on the Passat B6 is antifreeze, which enters the oil through a rusted heat exchanger. But we have learned to deal with this problem. In particular, experienced car enthusiasts simply replace the factory heat exchanger with an air-cooled radiator, which was installed on the Passat B6 with 2.0-liter gasoline power units. This is considered the most optimal way to solve the ATF cooling problem. Pre-selective DSG automatic transmissions on the Passat B6 are available in two varieties: TDI diesel engines, 1.8 TSI and 2.0 TSI engines, as well as the VR6 power unit, received a 6-speed pre-selective automatic transmission DQ250-02E. This is a quite good DSG with an impressive service life, especially if you attend maintenance in a timely manner and react to any kicks that appear while driving. In this case, the box will serve you faithfully for many years. But there are cases when car enthusiasts with an aggressive driving style and a chipped engine simply broke the differential. The 1.4 and 1.8 TSI engines are paired with a 7-speed DQ200-AM dual-clutch automatic transmission. We can safely say that this transmission is the worst. If you feel vibration while driving in second gear, this is a sure sign that wear has appeared on the clutch. If you replace the clutch, then this will be followed by a mandatory replacement of the mechatronics, since there will be noticeable kicks when shifting down. In advanced cases, the bearing and oil seal of the input shaft begin to wear out, so it is best to change them preventively. Power units from 2.0 liters received all-wheel drive, which was developed on the basis of the second-generation Haldex clutch. This is a multi-plate wet clutch located in the rear axle gearbox. In addition, a control unit is located on its body. Immediately after the appearance of all-wheel drive Passats, the clutch often broke and it was almost never possible to repair it. Today, Haldex can be repaired in almost 100% of cases. Most often, the tiny electric motor of the pump is the first to fail. This is easy to understand. ESP system errors appear and the rear axle drive stops working. If you encounter this problem, then you need to remove the ninth fuse on the left. If it burns out, do not rush to replace it. First, deal with the breakdown of the hydraulic pump. Most often, the electric motor breaks down due to excessive wear of the commutator brushes. Or it will be flooded by ATF, which leaks through the oil seal. It may also fail due to wear on the collector or a short circuit. But in this case, this will also affect the condition of the power supply board. In any case, you will need to purchase a new pump, or look for an electric motor. But if there are problems with the ECU, you can try to repair it. By the way, the power supply often dies due to moisture getting into it. The problem is insufficient sealing. And this is a miscalculation of Volkswagen engineers to maximize the life of the clutch. We strongly recommend filling in new oil after 30,000. Also, do not forget to check the tightness of the electric motor oil seal. The paintwork gradually wears off due to exposure to road chemicals. The paint literally wears off in pieces. There are also vulnerable places: wheel arches, door corners, hood, trunk, edge under the windshield. Even if you completely repaint the car, this does not save the situation. After 2 to 3 years, the metal will bloom in the same places. Finding a Passat B6 with a well-preserved body is almost impossible. Few people know, but the B6 is one of the first foreign cars to have a full-fledged windshield heating. And for inexperienced car enthusiasts from the CIS, it was a real shock how much it costs to replace it. Today, the average price of a windshield with heating filaments is about $400, but you can easily find a Chinese equivalent that will cost 2 times less. The car may have optional adaptive headlights that direct the light beam behind the steering wheel, but the servo drive is not particularly durable, since after about 80 to 100,000 it stops, and the lenses begin to move exclusively horizontally. All headlights installed on the Passat gradually degrade, their glass becomes cloudy, their reflectors go blind. But all this can be repaired. Competent specialists will return them to their original appearance without any problems. Another new feature for the Passat series is rear LED lighting, which, in theory, should last forever. But in reality everything turned out completely differently. Rumor has it that cars received a low-quality batch of lights from the assembly line that had rings that were too large. In principle, lighting is easily repaired, but before that you need to get to it. To do this, you will have to cut through the housing and then resolder the failed LEDs, one of the most vulnerable points of the Passat B6. Lock mechanisms easily fail and external handles become unresponsive. Sometimes the problem can be corrected by simply lubricating the servo drive. But God forbid in winter water gets into the handle mechanism, which then freezes and damages the braiding of the lock cable. All modifications of the Passat B6 have a servo parking brake, and one cannot say that it turned out to be successful. Perhaps the main problem is that for many car enthusiasts the handbrake button simply stops functioning. All because the miniature micro switch in it fails or becomes clogged with dirt, so the handbrake can only work after several presses of the button. Sometimes the key can be repaired, and on the market, if you try, you can find replacement keys from Chinese manufacturers. In addition, the servo drive of the pads often breaks. This unit is an electric motor with a gearbox. It is installed in a plastic housing and is located on the brake caliper of the rear wheel. Over time the tightness is broken, and dirt gets inside the case, corrosion appears, and the inevitable wedge follows. Sometimes the plastic case cannot withstand the accumulated dirt and simply falls apart. You can understand this by the fact that the car does not respond to the handbrake button. For preventive purposes, we recommend removing the drive and cleaning the joint between the housing and the caliper. You can drop a little grease into the gearbox. The longer the Passat B6 is used, the sooner the car owner will encounter climate control malfunctions. Most often, it stops regulating the temperature normally, and a rustling sound also appears. Diagnostics usually gives an error for the electric motors of the dampers. Most often, a breakdown occurs due to the fact that there is no signal from the potentiometer in the servo drive because its track is clogged. Solving this problem is not difficult. You need to remove the damper servos, disassemble them and clean them. Another problem area. Heated seats often break down. Fortunately, they are very easy to repair. We simply remove the upholstery and solder the broken wires. The front suspension comes with McPherson struts. There's only one lever per wheel. Silent blocks can easily withstand 50,000, but then they begin to crumble. They are sold separately and are not that expensive. The rear silent blocks are located in aluminum consoles, and even 5 years ago, their price was very high. You had to buy analogs. And such an analog exists. These are silent blocks from Skoda Fabia, Volkswagen Polo and Audi A2. Of course, I had to bother, because I had to repress this silent block into my native console. Moreover, it also needed to be oriented correctly, which was very difficult. Fortunately, now original spare parts have dropped significantly in price, and replacements are even several times cheaper. The car also has a feature related to the front stabilizer bushings. If we take the original unit, then they cannot be implemented without a stabilizer. Fortunately, now you can find many substitutes, but 10 years ago you had to suffer to find a replacement. In the rear suspension, you will also have to pay attention to the silent blocks of the lower trailing arms. They make themselves known after about 100,000. All B6 Passats received an electric booster, which very often breaks down. Typically, diagnostics indicate a break in communication with the control unit, or a short to ground is detected. And here it's one of two things: moisture got into the block, or the contacts of the microcircuits were broken, but it's unlikely to be found. So you almost always have to replace the entire rack. In the very first Passat B6 models, the electric power steering fault indicator could come on at any moment, which would block the steering wheel, and the car might not start for a long time. The steering column lock is to blame. Fortunately, in those years this was covered by warranty repairs, but this problem still occurs today. As the steering rack wears out, it begins to knock. This usually happens due to souring of the spring of the crackers, or due to their excessive wear. There are a couple of crackers on the Passat rack. To remove the unpleasant knocking noise, they will have to be disassembled and lubricated. Usually this is enough.